You may or may not think that I read your comments or read what you say on X or, that I'm just, but I do. I pay attention. And the other day, one commenter sent me a name. He said, you really, really, really need to get Peter de Vietien on your show because he believes that Optimus is going to have a soul. So, Peter, thank you for coming on today. We're going to dig into Optimus in a minute, but before we do, I just wanted to, introduce you in a way that I think folks in the audience will appreciate. You are a
Cool.
major Tesla investor. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I guess so. I,
Are
I
you are,
wouldn't I
are
wouldn't say
you
no to that.
are you an all-in investor?
Yeah, I have like 130% of my net worth in Tesla right now. Yeah.
130%. Oh, so in other words,
Yeah.
you're on the margin or something.
Yeah, so I'm about 50% stock and 50% options as of today. I'm quite agile, but I've been there for at least the last 2 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So you're waiting for June 15th or something approximating June 15th.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the market to realize what I think I know.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that the market can be very forward looking. They're not always, but they can be. So I'm hoping that they are forward looking on this one.
So you are betting on information arbitrage.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that's actually very reasonable. Like if since I've obsessed with the stock all day, every day for 10 years, how could surely there's billions of dollars in the stock already of people who are equally obsessed, but it's, a 1.2 trillion dollar stock. So there's trillions of dollars of people who have no idea.
So and then have you been successful? Have you made any money playing Tesla stock?
Yeah, so I actually made probably overall I pretty much made more money in oil and gas during
Interesting.
COVID. So I caught the first wave of Tesla on the Model 3 Y ramp. And then I like 5x'd off of that, roughly 5x my net worth. And then I could have done way more. I sold early. And then COVID happened and then oil went negative. Um, I'm a nuclear engineer, so I have like an energy background, and I studied commodities a little bit. And I was like, okay, well, we're gonna still use oil in 50 years, like that's like guaranteed. So oil should never be negative. One third of North American oil and gas companies went bankrupt in the first like 8 months of COVID or something because they thought it was going to be like a 7 year pandemic. And I was
Yeah.
like, that is crazy. That's not going to happen. So then I switched and went 100%, like 130% all in on oil and gas. And
Okay.
then I like 10x'd off of that. And then Tesla was super high in like 2021. So then I just held out in treasury bonds and gold for
Wow.
2021,
Wow.
2022, even 2023. And then 2024, when V12 came out, I was like, they fit. Okay. Like that pushed forward the timeline dramatically of when I expected FSD to come out, the synthetic souls.
Yeah.
So now I'm all in again because of that.
I see. Okay. All right. So you have a real ear for the market. You really paying attention. As you say, it's your full-time job.
Yeah, yeah. I'm doing a finance startup right now, and then I'm investing full time, and it's probably like uh 70-30 investing and 30% in the finance startup. Yeah, yeah. So I'm definitely that's all I do.
All right. So let's just take 1 minute here to talk about my current feelings about where the market is and where Tesla is, and then you can reflect on what you're thinking. I've been saying for months now that we have at least a shot of going into a recession because of all these
Mhm.
cutbacks. First of all, because of uncertainty. So we had a lot of optimism going immediately after the Trump victory, but then I said we'll have chaos. That'll create uncertainty. And then the part of the chaos is we're going to lay off all these people and we're going to stop all these contracts for goods and services. And so that has the potential to throw us into a recession. And then we're also potentially going to see a 10 to 20% pullback in the markets, partially because of that anticipating a recession, partly because they were just way out past their skis. But that by the end of the year, all would be well, and Trump's promised golden age will be happening. So that's my theory of the market. What's your theory of the market?
So that seems entirely possible to me, extremely possible. I'm actually so like the forward PDE on the market is like 23 on the S&P 500, and it's like the expected 10-year returns is only like 3% or something, or 2%. So the market is broadly not undervalued at the moment. The market is overvalued in general. And like interest rates are high, and I think that the whole market was just hoping that interest rates would at least stay steady or go down. I think that there's potential for interest rates to actually go back up, and I think that the market could get significantly rug pulled if interest rates went back up. So it's so scary for me right now. Like I am so stressed because I think that Tesla is on the verge of unveiling one of the most profitable products ever made by humanity. But Tesla has 180 price to earnings ratio. Palantir has a 600. The whole market is super frothy, especially this side of it. So I think that there could be a significant multiples contraction throughout the broader market, and Tesla would participate in that. But at the same time, I think that we're just on the verge of, Tesla could potentially 10x their earnings. They could go from 7 billion to 70 billion in the next 24 months. And that's just unheard of. For a company this big, that's just there really is no historical precedent. There really is. There really isn't.
Right. Yes.
It's like the golden handcuffs. Like I can't sell.
Yeah.
Even though I'm terrified, I can't sell. 'Cause-
Well, okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're fairly well aligned. The one place that we're not aligned is I think the bonds should rally. I think that as they begin to believe that Doge is real, and that therefore the government will be spending less, and still taking in roughly the same amount, that deficits should drop. As deficits drop, interest rates should go down. As interest rates go down, that'll be one of the stimuluses for the economy that will perk things back up by the end of the year. So that's my most likely scenario as I see it.
I hope you're right. That would just my blood pressure would drop 20%, That'd be great.
All
I'd
right.
get better sleep.
All right. So let's switch then. So you're the soul of, I am assuming, both the car and the bot would be the FSD chip. I'm assuming. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the chip and the software. Yeah, the neural net.
All
Yeah.
right. So talk to me about how you conceive in your mind of this being a synthetic soul. Everybody that follows my channel knows I'm a rabid born again Christian. I have Bibles all over my shelf back here. So I'm very interested in the synthetic soul that you're talking about.
Mhm. Yeah, so I actually my first choice was doing a PhD in philosophy to try to recreate consciousness using computer simulations. And then I was like, oh, but I actually need a job. So then I went into nuclear engineering instead. So I've always been super interested in what consciousness is, like the great problem or the hard problem of consciousness. We really don't know exactly what consciousness is. And well, I mean, Christians have an answer. Modern society has rejected it, but Christians do have an answer. Um, and I think that we have rejected it way too hastily. But so for the synthetic soul, like if you're telling a robot, hey, go make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich,
Right.
that seems like quite a simple thing, like a young human can do it.
Mhm.
But the problem is that programming is linear, like all classical programming is linear. So when you try to like take the jar out of the pantry and you try to open the jar, you try to pick up the knife and scoop the peanut butter, there's like a million different ways that all those things can happen. Each little action has a million different ways it can happen. So if you have strict linear programming, you can't do it. You need to have more fuzzy programming that can come to a good solution for those millions of little details that can happen, right? And classical computers have not been able to do that. They've been nowhere close. If you give a classical computer an array of a billion numbers and you say, "Hey, square every single one of these numbers," there's only one right answer. There's only one way to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
It can do that better than the rest of humanity combined. But making a peanut butter jelly sandwich, it couldn't. So Tesla, Elon was like, he's like, "Hey, AI is going to get good enough to where we don't need all the sensors. The cameras are plenty of sensory input. The AI will become intelligent enough to where just looking at camera data, it'll be able to navigate reality and navigate all those millions of potential outcomes in a sensible way." And he made that bet a decade ago, doubled down on it, doubled down on it, doubled down on it. And lo and behold, now we have Transformers. The neural net's finally caught up, and now it looks like his bet is paying off.
So we saw yesterday, we saw a figure being able to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, more or less, uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, metaphorically, putting stuff away, able to, kind of act naturally and normally in its environment. Um, my understanding of the way that the robotics companies were approaching this was that they were first teaching the robots to do all the basic functions: push, pull, grab, turn over, flip, so there's maybe 80 or 90 basic things that they needed to know how to do. And then you could build on top of that. Do you think that's
Mhm.
what's happening? Or do you think that now we have the end-to-end neural net that it's different than that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that it would probably, I don't know. One of the things I've always thought is that one of the hard parts is actually just getting a world model inside the AI, like getting like a basic sense of the laws of physics, Like every 5-year-old human understands Newton's laws. They understand that if you swing a ball, it'll keep on swinging. It's intuitive. They couldn't articulate it, but they do understand it. And I, I think that that's probably one of the breakthroughs that's happening now is that we're just able to encode so much real world happenings that the laws of physics kind of come in with that. Um, as to the specific training that they do, their specific regimens, I'm not sure. I think that a lot of the other robotics companies probably would encode for more specific things. And then I think that Tesla would probably encode more for more holistic world understanding.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and part of that is just Tesla has the compute power to do that, and they have the training data to do it as well.
All right. So when we think of a soul, because you're making the analogy here, when we think of a soul, we don't necessarily just think of the ability to accomplish making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but we might be thinking about things like whether it's going to taste good or whether you put the peanut butter on first and then the jelly. And in my case, I put lettuce on. Okay.
Yeah,
And everybody's going, lettuce.
I
Anyway,
do bananas.
you
Yeah,
do an see, I mean, yeah.
yeah,
So
screw it.
the soulishness might include whether it's going to taste good, not taste good. It might include, um, is it good for you? It might, and then it might go even further into, is it okay to do this, or am I depriving some other human of some peanut butter that they need more than I do? So how do you think about, since you were thinking about coming up with
Right.
the definition of consciousness? How do you think about your soul in those regards?
Yeah, so actually, I do think that human souls, and actually, I think that other animals have souls as well. You know,
Hmm.
like if you look at an ant and you smack on the table, it'll run out of fear. You know, and I do think it experiences fear. You know, and I think that's actually more profound. Actually, I wanted to start with ant simulations. I wanted to simulate ant consciousness to start with, or maybe even bacteria. You know,
I see, I can
um,
I can suggest a couple of movies. I don't know if those two ant movies would help you. There's some kind of,
oh yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that's cool. I like bugs. You know, bugs are
No,
great.
no, no.
You
The
know.
those what was it called? What were the ones? We had
Oh,
the
like an ant's
two
life?
yeah, ant life. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Their English was great in Ant's life, you know.
Yeah.
So in like theory, like philosophy of mind, they have this thing called a zombie, and it's pretty much meant to describe this exact thing. And their definition was is that it would be like a human who you could not tell whether they had a soul or not. They
Hmm.
would talk to you, they would move throughout the world, they would do all these activities, but there actually may just be nothing on the inside. You know, they may not be experiencing, they can't taste pineapple, they can't fall in love, they can't have preferences, they don't have that internal sense of existence, you know, the observer, the awareness within. Um, so that's actually what I think is being created right now. I think we're creating
A
zombies
zombie.
that,
Okay.
yeah, and they can act in a way that we would not be able to tell whether they had an internal experience, and they can mimic having desires, you know. But I
Yeah.
don't think that they actually will have that internal existence in the same way that we do. That's my guess.
But they could, based on large language models, based on having an understanding of the world in terms of all the his. I mean, I've just had some very deep theological conversations with Grok.
Yeah.
They could, in that regard, they could have enough soulishness to be, oh, um, peanut butter I might have an allergy, or my human might have an allergy to peanut butters. Maybe I should ask my human before I serve the peanut butter.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that I think that it's possible in the limit to have a machine that acts indistinguishable from a human, to where no human could actually tell whether it has that internal experience or not. You know, I think that they'd be able to like pretend to fall in love, you know, but they wouldn't even be pretending. You know, it's a weird rug pull, you know,
Yeah,
for us,
yeah.
you know, experiencers.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So in other words, by mimicking or by getting into all of the literature that's ever been written on that subject, whether it's love or hate or concern or anxiety, whatever it is, they could mimic all these things extremely well.
I think they could be Shakespeare actors, and I think that they may be able to be some of the best Shakespeare actors ever. Um, yeah, but so also I view that as like quite down the road, you know,
Okay. Yeah.
so I see FSD as like cameras in, and then you have 3 degrees of freedom out. You really, excuse me, you really only have 2 degrees of freedom out. You have like the left and right steering, and then acceleration forward and back. So going from like 2 degrees of freedom to like 60, you know, like if you have like a robot doing a Shakespeare play, um, I view that as kind of like exponentially more difficult, you
I
know.
got you. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So, but in the early going, so we've got the first leg of this journey is going to be the robotaxis coming out ostensibly in June. I'm thinking that between now and June, maybe even as early as next week, we're going to have Grok speaking to us.
Mhm.
Now we've heard
Yeah.
a couple of these other large language models speak, and they are better than a computer voice. They sound a
Mhm.
little more human than a computer voice, but they're still relatively flattish.
Mhm.
Um, uh, Not believable 100%. But Grok,
Yeah.
at least Grok based on the textual exchanges, Grok's attempt seems to be way, way more cool, way more interesting, way more soulish, if you will.
Mhm.
So we could be
Yeah.
looking at that as early as next week and hearing Grok's voice and having conversations with it. What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be cool. Whenever I see Grok's output, I imagine like a very intelligent, disobedient teenage boy who drinks Monster Energy drink, who just kind of like knows everything, It's the whiz kid,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
the defiant whiz kid. And yeah, when I talk to the Chat GPT one all the time. It's just so incredibly useful. I had it teaching me about like the organic chemistry of amino acids through and through. I have an engineering degree, not, and it was teaching me that for like 20 minutes. And then I switched to like the ecumenical councils and asking it, about like exactly when was the New Testament written, like all the, and it just had all the, so it's, but it seemed like ChatGPT seemed like the female HR executive. Um yeah, the f female Silicon Valley HR executive.
There you
That's
go.
who that seemed like.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we get the voice next week on Grok, let's say. And then between now and June 15th, I have to believe that Grok gets included into the car. That when
Mhm.
it comes out as a robotaxi, it will have the voice. And so preferably that'll be tested on the rest of us in terms of having the voice in the car. What kind of I, I was gonna ask Rock the question this morning. I didn't get to it yet. Got interrupted. I was gonna ask Rock this morning, what kind of limitations are there to having that voice be everything we want it to be, which would include the voice which can answer all the questions in the encyclopedia, just like you just talked about, the voice
Mhm.
that could tell us where the local in and out, where the best exit would be for an in and out, and also tell us that the car, the battery is having trouble and we need to pull over.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about that too, like integration, like what would be the point? And it's as of today, so I just went traveling. I was traveling for most of last year. I was outside of the country. And I actually found some of the best tour guides are the taxi drivers. I've heard people say that as a trope, like people are like, duh, like of course, but I kind of discovered it, rediscovered it. So I would actually take not even Ubers, I would actually take local taxis just to get information from the
Mm.
people. They knew it really well. So the synthetic soul can drive the car, but then you can have a second synthetic soul that can talk to you about the city. They can talk to you about your interests. They can say, "Oh yeah, well, if like what kind of person are you? Like are you like a music person? Are you like a guns person? Like what kind of person?" I live in Florida, so guns comes to mind. Like what kind of do you like, orchestras, and it's like, oh, okay, I see. Well, like over here, like, okay, where are you staying again? Like Grok can have that kind of conversation with a person who's in the robotaxi, and then it's just it completely replaces the taxi experience, since it can search the internet in real time, it just always has the latest up to date. They can say like, oh yeah, actually there's a concert happening in 3 hours. You know, so I think that could actually be extremely useful, and I think that some people would take the robotaxi just to talk to Grok in
I
that
think
way.
kids would definitely.
Oh,
So,
kids are gonna love all this.
so
Yeah.
yes, and then if you have agents, if you have your agents hooked up there as well, then it can just go ahead and call and get the tickets for you. At the best
Oh,
available
yeah.
seats. Yeah, just like so you can do it all
Yeah.
as you're traveling along.
Totally.
Okay, so is there? I don't know anything about computer science. Do you see any limitations in terms of space on the FSD chip, or would there have to be a separate chip, or is this going to have to be something that's hooked to the cloud, or and all the latency issues that might incur, or what do you think?
Yeah, so one thing, internet connectivity. I've been driving Teslas for 5 years now, and the connectivity is a bit sporadic. I don't know how much, honestly, like in mainland America, they can probably just pay a little bit more money and get better connectivity for all their cars. Um, but as of today, I send a voice note, then it compresses that voice note, sends it over the internet to ChatGPT servers, then it processes it and sends it back, and it does so in like 100 millisecond latency.
Right, right.
So I think that the car will essentially just be a phone.
Okay. So
And it, yeah,
it could
yeah.
be, I guess it could be hooked up to Starlink, I suppose. You could just,
Yeah. If there's areas where there's really poor connectivity, then put a Starlink in it, you
yeah.
know. Yeah. Yeah,
All right, so
not
so
cheap.
that gives us our robot car, and you're way too young to have been watching My Mother the Car or Kit or any of those shows that
Yeah.
were on years ago, but they were pretty funny, pretty and they spoke to you just like a human. There was because they were supposedly you know in My Mother the Car's example, she was dead, so she had come back to life and was talking to her son through the car. Okay,
Oh,
so that's why
okay.
it's very human, very human experience. But anyway, so then how does this then translate over when our humanoid robots start populating?
Yeah, so pretty much the way I see it. So I worked on the physics team for 7 years, and physicists always simplify things, Like they say that like, oh, a flashlight is a device which emits photons. A cell phone is a device which emits photons to a cell phone tower and then receives photons from the cell phone tower. And that is what a phone is. So we always simplify things. So forgive me if I simplify too much, but I see the Tesla car as a device which takes in camera input and then outputs 2 degrees of freedom, forward, back, side to side. And then I see an Optimus robot, like the first version, as a device which takes in camera input and then outputs like 25 or 28 degrees of freedom. I think like 22 are just in the hand, which
Mhm,
is
yep.
remarkable. So
Mhm.
maybe like 32 degrees of freedom. And yeah, I think that it'll be able to do a lot of like shoveling, carrying things from side to side, turning bolts, turning screws, and which is a lot of factory work. I think that it'll be able to do quite a bit. And there's a lot of factory work today, which is relatively dangerous. Like people don't get injuries being on in the laptop class.
Yeah.
So I think that it's going to be wonderful to replace and maybe not even the most boring jobs, but just the most dangerous jobs, the ones where people lose a finger. Like you don't, people lose fingers all the time. We
True.
got 10 of them.
Yeah.
And if you have Optimus losing a finger, it's no big deal. You don't If we could have no humans lose fingers anymore after the year 2035, that would be awesome. So I think that that's where it's gonna make its debut
You
the
do
most.
know if we asked Optimus that question, theoretically, Optimus would have a clapback on that. It would say, best stories are, if if you haven't lost a finger, you don't have a story. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, where's your hero's journey? Come
that's right.
on. How soft have we become?
All right. Okay. So now are you in the class of people that are looking forward to Optimus and Robotaxi as something which approximates $35 trillion in CapEx, as Elon has stated?
Yeah, so I actually as 6 months ago, I said that Optimus was way too sci-fi and that it was like in the indeterminate future,
Oh, okay.
6 months ago. And so I just focused on Robotaxi. As of like the last month, AI has just advanced so much faster than I expected. I've had multiple moments where like I see something on Twitter and then I just like stare off into the distance and I'm like, oh God, like AI is actually here. Like seeing the '03 Mini scored like 115 IQ. It's like, what? I thought that we were going to be railing at like 90 IQ for the next like 6 or 7 years, and then we all of a sudden jump to 115. Like 90 IQ is monumental. That's like world changing, having like a
For a
human level.
robot or yeah, for an
A
AI.
hundred and yeah, so now that AI is going so fast, I'm like, okay, well, Optimus probably is on the near term horizon. But but so that's where I'm at today, and I think that I am like way more bullish on technology than most people. So I tend to stick to the Robotaxi because
Oh,
I think that the Robotaxi alone is a $10 trillion proposition,
10 trillion. Okay.
um, 10 trillion dollar market cap, and then at least or more. And I think that that's very substantial. I think that that's in the next 24 months. Um, so then that's the thing that I'm yelling about from the rooftops mostly.
All right. So, any last thoughts about your soulishness approach to the Optimus and the Robotaxi?
Yeah, so we have these traditional things, like a construction worker or a taxi cab driver, and all included, they roughly make like $80,000 a year, right?
Mhm.
So if you can make a product which then reduces that cost from $80,000 a year down to like $800 a year, so that's a factor of 100. It reduces the cost of maybe 20% of the economy by a factor of 100, like 20% of human labor. Um, how valuable is that product? And God forbid, I mean, well, God forbid, if one company has essentially a monopoly on that and they have like a 10-year lead on the rest of the world, uh, yeah, one company has a 10-year lead on reducing 25% of all labor costs by a factor of 100. How do you begin to value that? I mean, the numbers just seem bonkers. And I think that as we start to see it, I don't drive anymore. Of the last 4,000 miles, I haven't driven more than 2 miles at a time of the last 4,000 miles. So as I think the market starts to digest that, I think that we could see crazy valuations.
Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, you're in good company. I've 2.5 years ago, we put out the Elon Musk mission, and we were saying
Mm.
even then that these crazy valuations were going to take place. So I'm definitely a huge believer in information arbitrage. It's really cool when you can rummage through the internet instead of rummaging through the corporate trash in order to get your insider information.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, Randy, thanks so much. I appreciate being on here. It's great to talk to you. Yeah, and love to talk about Tesla, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're going to do it again. Actually, this show will probably be on Friday night. If you're listening to us on Friday night, that's when I was planning to show it. And then over the weekend, probably on Saturday night, we will do a show that'll be about energy. It'll be about nuclear fusion, nuclear fission, but we'll talk about the energy prospects for Elon and Tesla as well. All right, so Peter, thank you so much for coming on, and to
Yeah.
all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.
Thanks, Randy.